What is it that makes professional cyclists look so good, so slick on their bikes?
It's probably the kit, mate. I mean, it's like everything matches and it all just looks really well fitting and it's crisp and it's...
Yeah, that's not the only thing.
All right, speed. I mean, everyone looks good when they're going fast, don't they? Especially if, as a pro, you're probably ripped and you're tan.
Yeah, and I take your points, but there is also more to it even than that, because even at slow speeds, pro cyclists just look so smooth and so stylish on their bikes. And I've actually got some good news for you.
You got some good news?
I have.
For me?
Yes, even we can look better on our bikes without getting fitter or faster. All you've got to do is work on a few bad habits that you might have got into since you started cycling. So today we're going to be talking through things like bouncing up and down on the saddle, or bobbing up and down and around with your body, or riding with your knees out like you're some kind of chopper on a chopper, or riding with your elbows out, plus solutions to those problems.
I don't know, mate. You definitely do the whole elbows thing, and I bob up and down from time to time.
I know, and I'm very self-conscious about my elbows, so hopefully I will also learn something on today's video.
All right. We'll start with the most common one, bobbing up and down as you ride along. Now, I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with this, other than that, well, it's a waste of energy, but it just kind of looks a little bit ungainly, doesn't it?
It's not very graceful.
No.
There are pros who bob. I mean, Eddie Merckx bobbed up and down, proof in the pudding. He wasn't that bad, was he?
No.
But there aren't many pros these days, and if they do, they kind of stand out like a sore thumb.
So we'll go today.
Most of them are as solid as a rock in the saddle, even when they're very close to their physical limit. How do they do that?
Well, practice, that is a very important one. Actually, just recognising that you might be susceptible to bobbing up and down a little bit, and then remembering to stop whenever you begin to do it. It's definitely an element of being a learned behaviour, I think. But certainly with professional cyclists, the trend now for doing core work certainly helps keep that upper body rock solid.
The theory goes that a strong core allows you to keep your back and neck stable whilst riding, which in turn means that almost all the power you are producing goes through your glutes and legs and therefore directly into the pedal stroke.
And we've got a few videos here on GCN with cycling specific core workouts. The other area though that you will obviously want to work on is on the bike.
Now, in terms of things to do on the bike, we have two recommendations. Firstly, cadence drills, and secondly, riding the rollers.
I think cadence is super important. Firstly, pedaling slowly makes you more susceptible to bobbing up and down. So, cadence like this, you find you can just grind it out, whereas the faster you pedal, the faster you'd have to bob your upper body. So therefore, it theoretically becomes more difficult to do so.
So try this session a couple of times per week. What you want to do are 5-minute efforts, starting at 80 RPM for the first minute, and then raising 10 RPM per minute until you're done. All the time, concentrating far more on keeping a still upper body than the power you're putting through the pedals. Get 5 to 6 reps in per session, a couple per week, and you should soon start to notice quite a big difference.
The rollers trick is a really good one too. The less you bob and move your body on rollers, the easier it is to ride them. So you will naturally start to move your body less, just to make things simpler for yourself. Set your rollers up in front of a mirror and concentrate on keeping as still as possible on the bike for 10 minutes at a time.
Our next terrible technique is bouncing, i.e. those riders who bounce up and down on the saddle, and some people, even with a still upper body, can find themselves doing this.
It's often associated with higher cadences, and that's perhaps why it's quite a common sight in spin classes as well. Just like with our first poor technique, this one can also partly be solved, at least, by cadence drills and practice.
Now, since this bouncing generally starts at higher cadences, the first thing to do is bring your cadence down to the point where you aren't bouncing, which will probably be around 70 RPM. Spend 5 minutes riding at the cadence which eliminates your bouncing, and then increase your cadence by 5 RPM every 2 minutes.
Now personally, I always find that I'm susceptible to bouncing in the saddle when my cadence is really high, but the resistance, so effectively the power I'm putting out, is really low. And that's definitely noticeable when I'm riding on rollers. I find that when I'm spinning a high cadence, I do tend to bounce. And so actually practicing on rollers isn't a bad idea if you've got access to a pair. And when you're on there, you'll find the sensation is one of kind of trying to control the upstroke of your pedals. You'll see when you do it. It's quite hard to describe, isn't it? Now, we don't want to sound pedantic, but there is a fine line, and that if you make yourself too rigid, too immobile, and too rock solid, it kind of also looks a little bit strange.
Yeah, you almost look a bit robotic, don't you, if you're too still. So what is that balance inside? Slightly relaxed upper body and arms.
Yeah, I think
fairly still upper body.
The key is to have relaxed arms, relaxed shoulders, but maybe keep that core nice and solid.
Hope that's clear.
Next up is riding with your knees out. Now again, even if you're not bothered at all by the aesthetics of cycling, and that is absolutely fine, riding with your knees out slows you down because they generate so much more aerodynamic drag that you will end up not going as fast despite putting the same amount of effort in.
One thing that you should definitely not do to try and remedy this bad technique is alter the position of your cleats to try and force your knees back in and straight. That is a recipe for injury. We've all got our own natural foot position as we walk and as we cycle, and you shouldn't be trying to change that.
Instead, what you should look at is your saddle height. So you will find it very difficult to ride with your knees out when your saddle is in the correct position. So therefore, if you are susceptible to riding with your knees out, perhaps simply a case that your saddle is too low. Now, it's actually quite straightforward to check that you're at least in the ballpark for correct saddle height. Find somewhere very safe and very quiet to ride your bike. You should just about be able to turn the pedals with your heels resting on them. Now, it is going to feel very uncomfortable. Your pelvis is going to be all over the place. So if you find that you can do it actually with a relative amount of comfort, then I suggest your saddle is probably too low.
We spoke to EF Education First chiropractor Matt Rabin about this, and he said that the problem here could be, and I quote, down to having shorter and or tighter gluteus medius or maximus, or possibly poor pelvic function and stability. Additionally, it could be weak adductor muscles or simply the way your hips sit in their sockets.
Now, diagnosing yourself can prove tricky, so if you are bothered about this, you might want to go and seek out a cycling-specific physio.
As I kindly pointed out at the beginning of this video, I always tend to ride with my elbows slightly out. Yeah, I've always wanted to change it. Well, to be fair, I haven't really put that much effort in.
No, and I can see why. I mean, Chris Froome rides with his elbows out, although I suppose it's probably the reason why, despite winning 4 Tours de France, people often point out that he actually doesn't look that good whilst he's doing it.
Yeah, I feel a lot better about myself now.
Well, I mean, you should, mate, because he has still won 4 Tours de France, so it can't be that detrimental to performance, can it?
No, that is true, although that said, it must also carry some kind of aerodynamic penalty, albeit less than having your knees out. So I reckon it's worth working on.
There are a few things you can look at here. Firstly, your reach, i.e. the distance between your handlebars and your saddle. If that length is too short, then you're going to be forcing yourself into a hunched position. So your elbows have got to go somewhere.
The other thing to look at here is your handlebar width. The current fashion amongst professional riders is to adopt narrower bars in order to get more aerodynamic. But if you're a rider with broad shoulders, that can encourage a more elbows out position.
Now, if neither of those things seem to help, as they appear to have done for Dan, then it might just be that it's your body's natural position and there's not very much you can do about it, so not worth worrying.
Yeah, hold your horses there, Si, because I also spoke to Matt Rabin about this. He did say it is my body's natural position. I'm probably adopting this slightly elbows out position to try and get more leverage through my torso and ultimately more power through the pedals.
More power through the pedals. I think there's a flaw in his logic there, Dan, when it comes to you.
All right. Anyway, he did give me a couple of things I can work on to try and remedy this. Firstly, working on my posterior chain and lower back strength, but also on my pelvic and shoulder stability.
So more core work then?
Yeah, it does seem like core work is the answer to a lot of these problems, isn't it?
Now, one thing that we have deliberately not gone into much detail on so far is your bike fit, because that has a huge bearing on your ability to adopt the correct technique. So if your saddle is too high or too low, too far forwards, too far backwards, the reach to the handlebars is too long or too short, all of those things are going to compound any issues you have.
Yeah, you could though go of course to a professional bike fitter, but it's our opinion here at GCN that you should be able to get reasonably close to the perfect cycling position through your own research and trial and error. And in fact, we do have a number of videos that will help you get into the correct cycling position. And once you do find that right position, you will instantly look more professional, but more importantly, you're going to be far more comfortable.
Yeah, and the other thing that is definitely worth a mention, and indeed has a bearing on your comfort and position on the bike, is your flexibility. Because if you don't get comfortable on your bike, then you're going to be fidgeting, and it's far more likely that you'll slip into any kind of bad techniques. So in addition to your newfound core routine, you may well want to think about adding some stretching in the mix as well. Maybe just do yoga, that would sort it all out.
It's actually harder than... If that guy in the car was a cyclist, you'd see choppers.